Are we overrating the difficulty of the Texans' 2024 schedule? I think by any measurement, look, this is a harder schedule than last year. There's no doubt about that. I don't care what certain styles of rankings say about this schedule versus last year. Like, just the quarterbacks alone make me feel like the Texans are up against it. And just to, I guess, add some context to this, last year I would say the third best quarterback the Texans played behind Burrow and Lamar Jackson might have been Baker Mayfield, might have been Joe Flacco at the end of the year in the regular season, Joe Flacco. Might have been Trevor Lawrence. Like, they did not play a lot of good quarterbacks last year. And this year, all four quarterbacks who finished ahead of C.J. Stroud for the Pro Bowl in the AFC are on the schedule. Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen, Tua. Jordan Love's on the schedule. Dak Prescott's on the schedule. Jared Goff's on the schedule. I don't know how you feel about a rookie Caleb Williams, but he's on there in week 2. Like, there's a lot of – and I'm missing some, too. I know I'm missing some. There are a lot of good quarterbacks. And yet, Mike Sando of The Athletic, we went through his tiers of quarterbacks last week. He went through an exercise, Seth, where he took the final scores of all 30 quarterbacks, and he applied some – he didn't have rookies in there, so he just came up with some arbitrary numbers for the rookies. You know, Caleb's the best, then Jaden Williams, and so forth. Basically added up the ratings of the 17 quarterbacks that each of the 32 teams face. And if you add up the ratings of the Texans' 17 starting quarterbacks that they face on paper right now, we know some of those are going to change because of injury and performance. The Texans have the 19th hardest schedule, and it's mostly because the quarterbacks in this division, at least according to GMs around the league, currently are not very good. Trevor Lawrence, other than C.J. Stroud, Trevor Lawrence is mid, and then Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, there is not a lot of faith early in these guys right now.
I think that's the one where if you look at the top-end guys, obviously it catches, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Jordan Love. Those are the top-tier quarterbacks that they face. Then, it's easy to get hung up on what a tough schedule it is. I guess my one concern is that when you start looking at the bottom-tier quarterbacks they face, Anthony Richardson is in the bottom tier, Will Levis is bottom tier. You're going to face those guys 4 times. Those two teams have, in the case of the Colts, they have the upside of Anthony Richardson and the fact that Richardson on any given Sunday can be a real nightmare for you. Richardson can be that type of quarterback that maybe it doesn't work out for him in his career. Maybe 3 years from now he actually hasn't been that good. But as a defensive coordinator, you go into that game thinking, man, this guy can ruin my whole day on 2 plays. This guy can unleash a perfectly placed bomb downfield, or he's going to take off with his legs, and it's just going to ruin my Sunday. In the case of the Titans, I don't buy into Will Levis at all. I'm kind of surprised that there's still people that are buying into him. I think he's a flaming disaster, and yet I think they've gotten some good coaching around him. And there's a chance that it's a much better team this year. So I don't want to sleep on the Titans just because of previous issues that they had or even their quarterback, because I do think this is a scheme that, kind of like in a Gary Kubiak, Kyle Shanahan fashion, can get the most out of a mediocre quarterback.
Yeah, I've long thought throughout this offseason the Titans are going to be a bottom 5 or 6 team, but I will acknowledge that They made some moves that should improve his receiving. I mean, they signed Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd. Like, those two are an upgrade over what they were trotting out there alongside DeAndre Hopkins last year. So that's if healthy, it's an older trio, but it's a good trio of receivers. It's veteran guys, and with Ridley, there's a level of explosiveness to that group. I like the running backs, even though they lost Derrick Henry. Like, I think, Tony Pollard, when used in the right role, split with Tyjae Spears, the kid out of Tulane. Like, that's a backfield that has a little bit of explosiveness to it. They've picked up veterans. I mean, L'Jarius Sneed is a high level cornerback, but they went and got some. They got Quandre Diggs and they got Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams isn't the guy that Seattle traded 2 first-round picks for anymore, but it is some veteran help on the back end. So they've got some guys. I'm more concerned about this version of the Titans than I was last year's version of the Tennessee Titans.
If you look at the top-tier guys, the Mahomes, the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, I think that where it could easily go one way or the other is with Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers. Just in that Aaron Rodgers, we don't know exactly what he's going to look like, if he's going to be able to stay healthy. Whether he had an Achilles tendon tear or not, just given his injury history and his age, that you'd have questions about just how good he's going to be this year. And then with Josh Allen, I mean, Josh Allen's in a situation where kind of like it was with Pat Mahomes a few years ago when he lost Tyreek Hill, he's got a lot to prove this year. You have got to see Josh Allen on a team that doesn't have the same assets or weaponry that Pat Mahomes had at the time, just because he still had Travis Kelce. Yeah. Pat Mahomes still had Travis Kelce. Yeah. He had lost somebody that was, Tyreek Hill was a bigger loss than Stephon Diggs' loss in terms of the caliber of player at this stage of Stephon Diggs' career. But I think the Bills the Bills had a lot of losses in free agency. They're really under the gun this year. I think to a greater degree than most people are talking about it. They've got a lot of challenges both offensively and defensively.
The Chiefs when they traded Tyreek Hill and they made that decision to go, okay, we can't pay Patrick Mahomes, we can't pay Travis Kelce and pay Tyreek Hill and pay guys on defense, Chris Jones, guys like that. They were built on a much more solid foundation to execute that strategy than the Bills are right now. To your point, the Bills traded away Stephon Diggs for a draft pick. And, by the way, a draft pick that they don't even get to use until next year. It was a 2025 second-round pick. And they're getting rid of guys. They're not retaining foundational guys. Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, now Matt Milano's hurt for most of the season with this torn biceps. They're just – Andy Reid is your head coach in Kansas City. Sean McDermott is your coach in Buffalo. You just have, independent of how you feel about Mahomes versus Allen, they're clearly, at least on offense, executing a similar strategy. I'll tell you who puts a lot of pressure on, aside from Josh Allen and Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, Dalton Kincaid, the second-year tight end.
Right.
Because there's a lot, as you pointed out, Seth, the reason they could trade Tyreek Hill was because they could get average wide receivers and put them out there. Okay. The Bills have done that. They've gotten guys that might not even be average. But they had Travis Kelce in Kansas City, a Hall of Fame tight end. And Kincaid, a big part of what they're trying to do this year. That's a lot of pressure on a second-year guy.
Oh, and by the way, you and I haven't talked about this because you were out, and I don't think they even had, the official clarification didn't come out until maybe on late Friday or Saturday. Rashee Rice, for Mahomes, is not going to miss any games at the beginning of the season. They're going to let the legal process play out. So depending on how long that goes, I don't know. Maybe the legal process will play out at an advantageous time.
That's
right before Christmas.
Oh, right at Christmas time. Merry Christmas, Rashee. You're going to miss the Texans game. That would be beautiful. That's really interesting. I had not seen that, so I appreciate the update. It's really interesting because the NFL, since when does the NFL care about the legal process? They're their own.
You know what? It's come up in a few things. When it doesn't involve domestic violence, especially, I think they've tried to be, that's been more of the policy over the past few years.
But when it involves Rashee Rice and his friends possibly killing people on a freeway.
Yeah.
No, that's just interesting to me. So that'll be one weapon Mahomes has early on in the season at least. Does this make you any less? I don't know how nervous you were about the schedule to begin with the Texans. Does this resonate with you at all? That maybe hey, we're kind of they play a lot of top level quarterbacks, but the other quarterbacks they play are guys where there's a lot of questions about them.
No, I think if anything, it shows that maybe it's not as simple as look at the quarterbacks. Yes, it's the most important position, but. It's the offenses in total, because if you look at this listing of, the Texans, the quarterbacks they face aren't actually all that great. One of the mid-tier guys is Tua Tagovailoa. So, again, this goes back to the any given Sunday part. I don't care where Tua is going to rank historically amongst quarterbacks. It's a really scary offense.
Yes.
Is Tua the driver or the recipient of that? When it comes to playing them on that specific day, I don't care. Yeah. It's a really good offense, no matter how good or how responsible Tua is for it.
I think this is my biggest concern with the Texans schedule is, I'm concerned about the quarterbacks, but I think there is a similar concern, if not a maybe even a greater concern in these other cities about the Texans quarterback. You know, it's not like you're going into this schedule and Brock Osweiler's the quarterback. You're like, well, okay, Osweiler's got it. We feel pretty good about the team we built like they did in 2016, but Osweiler's our quarterback. So we can't stand toe-to-toe with Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen and Mahomes and on and on and on. I think these other cities are going through this exercise if they are, and they're going, okay, well, we got to play Stroud, we got to play Lamar Jackson. Like Stroud gets mentioned in those tiers. My biggest thing in looking at how Sando lays this out visually, Seth, in this article, the Texans only play one really bad team this year, and it's the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
Like even Minnesota, I know Darnold stinks, but they've got a lot of talent on that roster. I know Will Levis stinks, but as we just talked about, they've upgraded the talent around him tremendously. I think Indianapolis, I've said all along, is the second best team in this division, Richardson or no Richardson. So there are 5 or 6 or 7 garbage teams in the NFL. I think the Texans play one, maybe 2 of them all year.
Three of the quarterbacks 3 of the games played against lower tier quarterbacks are very much in the unknown category. Yeah. Caleb Williams and then twice with Anthony Richardson. Yeah. It's that the upside of those guys and the potential of those guys to be scary or wreck your day is very, very high. We just don't know yet. So I think the uncertainty about that and the potential for Caleb Williams, who the Bears did a really good job of surrounding with lots of veteran wide receiving help, and then Anthony Richardson, again, go back to the Any Given Sunday. That's the perception. I don't think it's an unwarranted concern or fear if you're looking at the names on the schedule.
We talked about that article earlier in The Athletic on the show today where they took the 10 teams that, according to the computer model that Austin Mock of The Athletic uses, the 10 teams with the best chance to win a Super Bowl, why they will and why they won't. The Texans were not among those 10 teams. I can't imagine they weren't any further down, that they were further down than 11th or 12th. But it was a computer model that simulated the season a bunch of times. And the top 10 teams included teams like the Jets and the Bills that I think the Texans are better than. If the Texans found their way onto that article, Seth, and it was the why they will and why they won't win a Super Bowl, what do you think? If the Texans don't win a Super Bowl, what do you think the biggest reason will be?
The biggest reason and the most likely right now would be just that they don't develop a solid rushing attack, especially when it comes to playoffs. There's times where you just flat out have to run the ball, and if you can't run the ball when you have to run the ball versus really good defenses, then this offense isn't going to be as potent as the passing game suggests it could be.
Yeah.
So right now, that's my biggest concern. And by the way, since it is good to point out, a lot of the computer models do have the Texans as like around the 14th or 15th favored to win the Super Bowl. Yeah. And like that, sometimes, you know, the lines are tweaked by human perception and what gamblers feel. And the Texans have had a glow up all off season long. The computers can be a much more objective look at just exactly, okay, what is unproven about this team and what have you. There's still a lot of projection going on with them. I tend to, I drink the Kool-Aid. A lot of this is a vote really for D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud and them being what I think they are, and then also improving over what they were last year. Yeah. I think that's the one, as much as people have praised C.J. Stroud, and for the most part people kind of, like most analysts are discounting a sophomore slump or something, but I think that they also at the same time haven't really accounted for the fact that C.J. Stroud is going to likely improve as a quarterback. With or without Stephon Diggs, I think that he's going to be a better quarterback for the duration of the season than he was looking at the entirety of last season.
This is not a reason why the Texans will win a Super Bowl, but this is in my reason why they are so high up on the odds board for winning a Super Bowl and why people are so bullish on over 9.5 wins. C.J. Stroud is one of the most popular players in the NFL right now.
Yeah,
point blank. Yeah. I mean, like the average Joe bettor looks at quarterback first and foremost when they're doing these things. I saw an article this weekend that said talking about trading cards, you know, and like C.J. Stroud. This is a super nerdy thing, but like of all the graded trading cards out there among NFL players, C.J. Stroud is light years ahead of everybody else right now. Like, he's got like 145,000 graded trading cards out there, which is more. If you were to put a fantasy team together of the highest graded ones at each position, like 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a tight end, and a defense and a kicker. CJ has more than the rest of those players combined. Like, he's that popular out there right now. He's an incredibly popular young player out there right now, you know? So it's fun to have, man. Really fun to have.